Hi everyone, as promised, today I will be continuing with the physiology of swallowing. Today I will be discussing the neural regulation of swallowing. Why is it necessary to have a proper devoted mechanism for the neural regulation of swallowing? As had been discussed, you know that one of the important functions of larynx is protection of the airway, and this is very important as you swallow, because what is happening here, the food particle has to go into the alimentary tract instead of going into the airway tract. What happens when it is going instead into the airway tract? That can result in penetration as well as aspiration, because as you can see here, there is a crossing over of the pathways, that is the food pathway as well as air pathway happening at the area of oropharynx, right? And if the mechanism is not regulated, what happens is that there is likely to be a severe aspiration. For safe swallow to happen, the timing of the closure of the valves have to be pakka, and for that there has to be an important mechanism which regulates all these. It is like the air traffic control system which regulates the flights. Okay, so here what is happening, there is a hierarchical system which is coordinated from the level of cortex of the cerebrum, and the main control system is occurring in the brainstem. In the brain cortex, for that you have the swallowing motor cortex, where the oral, pharyngeal as well as the esophageal area is represented, and along with that the ventral part of the laryngeal motor cortex is dealing with airway protection. In the brain, the area in front of the central sulcus, that is the precentral gyrus, is the motor area, and the postcentral gyrus area is sensory. So it is the precentral gyrus area which corresponds to the face, and the area in front that is dealing with swallowing, and that is a part which is the swallowing motor cortex. But along with that there is a little bit of somatosensory cortex which is dealing with swallowing, because there has to be an integration of the sensory input, right? And there is the inferior frontal gyrus area and the precentral gyrus area, the premotor cortex area, all these are dealing with swallowing. And how is it happening in detail? First of all, you have to know that there is a planning happening, because whatever happens has to be done in a planned and programmed manner, right? So for the planning to happen, you have the association cortex, and premotor cortex is getting programmed by the plan taken by cerebellum and basal ganglia together, and along with that supplementary cortex as well as anterior insula are also taking place in the planning and programming of swallowing. Now that is why a stroke in the area of cerebellum or the basal ganglia can result in swallowing problems. And what is happening when there is a middle cerebral artery stroke which affects the area of the swallowing motor cortex? It actually results in apraxia and agnosia rather than a frank aspiration. As you can see here, this is what is happening. The association cortex along with the cerebellum, basal ganglia, premotor cortex, supplementary cortex and anterior insula are taking place in coordinated planning for the swallowing to take place. Now, what is the role of anterior insula in swallowing? You might have heard about insula and the operculum, the orbital cortex, all these in the taste pathway, right? Yes, these areas actually deal with the integration of the taste with the swallowing movement, especially insula and the superior temporal gyrus area. However, anterior insula is having another important role, that is anterior insula is said to be associated with a lot of problems with aspiration if there is a stroke in that area. Why? Because along with thalamus as you know is the area where all the sensory input is getting integrated except for the olfactory pathway, right? So this anterior insula is actually taking a communication with the thalamus, and it is dealing with reciprocal inhibition of the CPG, that is central pattern generator of the respiration when the central pattern generator of the swallowing is getting activated. Now what is this CPG? Before coming to what is CPG, let's see what are the things which are in the brainstem which is necessary for swallowing. As you can see here, the various motor nuclei for the different output, that is the nucleus ambiguous, which is the motor nuclei for 9th and 10th cranial nerve, which deals with the innervation of the muscles of pharynx, palate and larynx. Along with that, hypoglossal nuclei for tongue muscles, motor nuclei of the trigeminal nerve for muscles of mastication, facial nerve nucleus for lip muscles and buccinator, motor nucleus in the cervical spinal cord for muscles of neck, that is ansa cervicalis is coming from that, right. Along with that, there is sensory input going through the nucleus tractus solitaris, which is the facial nerve nucleus, and the spinal trigeminal nucleus. So these are the things happening in the brainstem, but this is not alone what is happening. You need a central pattern generator, which is the most important thing in swallowing. Okay, when you are asked which is the most important structure in neural regulation of swallowing, it is the central pattern generator, and actually they are broadly divided into two categories, that is the ventrolateral central pattern generator and the dorsomedial central pattern generator. In the picture above my head, you can see the picture of spinal cord where dorsal root ganglion is dealing with the sensory input and the ventral root is dealing with the efferent output. I kept that picture so that you can remember, that is the dorsomedial central pattern generator is dealing with the sequencing of the sensory input, and hence it is located close to the sensory nuclei, that is near to the nucleus of tractus solitarius, whereas the ventrolateral central pattern generator is dealing with giving the efferent output to the various cranial nerve nuclei, so that it is situated near to the nucleus ambiguous area. So this is a schematic diagram which shows how the sensory input coming through the facial as well as the trigeminal nerve, which is going into the nucleus tractus solitarius, and from there it is going to the dorsal swallowing group of CPG, which is integrating the sensation, and from there it is going into the higher areas, and from the higher areas there is supramedullary inputs coming into the ventral swallowing group, which is actually giving signals into the nucleus ambiguous and the other efferent motor nuclei, which is the one which is regulating the muscles which are important in swallowing. Okay, now all these has to happen in a coordinated manner because the respiration has to be stopped. That is what I told you. The CPG for respiration has to be inhibited when the swallowing CPG is getting activated. And when does this happen? This is happening in the expiratory phase of respiration, because only if you are able to resume the expiration after the swallowing happens, the whatever the food particle that might have gone can get easily expelled from the airway tract. Okay, for that it has to happen in the expiration itself. So it is always in the expiratory phase swallowing happens. As you can see here, the major swallowing center is seen within the brainstem, and it is the central pattern generator in the form of dorsal as well as ventral swallowing group, that is the main swallowing center. So that is why whenever there is a stroke in the lateral medulla where all these structures are located, there is severe swallowing difficulty, in contrast to a cortical stroke where there is a bilateral representation. This bilateral representation is one reason why swallowing is not much affected in a middle cerebral artery stroke, even though there can be apraxia and agnosia. And this representation can be actually skewed, that is one area will have more representation. So sometimes stroke in one area can cause severe swallowing difficulty. Stroke in the opposite side might not cause that much swallowing difficulty. All these things can happen. I'll be talking you about neurodysphagia, the pathophysiology of dysphagia in stroke in various areas and how to deal with it, along with the assessment of swallowing will be dealt with as separate topic in another video. Until then, goodbye.